Good morning, students. Let's continue with the chapter. Open to page number 79. We were doing this chapter, An Angel in Disguise, and we have reached to the place where everyone was leaving the hovel, and this little poor girl, Maggie, was all alone there. Let's see. We can see that only Mr. Thompson was there, and when he came back into the hovel, Maggie questioned him that, will you be leaving me here all alone, Mr. Thompson? So, she was all scared, pale and white, with a fear that she might be left alone. So let's read more. Oh, Mr. Thompson, she cried out, catching her suspended breath. Don't leave me here all alone. So she was very scared, and that is why she said here, please don't leave me alone. Though rough in exterior. This means maybe he had a rough kind of a physical build. Joe Thompson, the wheelwright, had a heart, and it was very tender in some places. He liked children and was pleased to have them come to his shop, where sleds and wagons were made or mended for the village lads without a draft on their hoarded sixpences. So, this wheelwright, Joe Thompson, he was a kind-hearted person and he really loved children, right? So, maybe his exterior was rough, maybe he looked like a huge, rough and a giant man, but his heart had tender places. He was soft-hearted, right? He liked children and he would love it if these children would come to his shop. Now, what kind of a shop he had? He was a wheelwright, right? He used to mend these wheels. Let's see. Where sleds and wagons were made or mended. So that was his work for the village lads, for the village boys or people, without a draft on their hoarded sixpence. So without any hidden, trouble or something, he used to make those sledges or mend them. No, dear, he answered in a kind voice, going to the bed and stooping down. Stooping means bending down over the child. You shan't be left here alone. He said that you shall not be left here alone. Then he wrapped her with the gentleness almost of a woman. He took the bedsheet, he wrapped that poor child like a woman with gentleness. In the clean bedclothes here means the bed sheets, which some neighbor had brought, and lifting her in his strong arms, bore her out into the air and across the field that lay between the hovel and his home. So he was a very kind-hearted man. He bent down, he took some bed sheets, he wrapped his poor child into them, and he picked that girl into his arms, right? And then he moved out of the house or that hovel into the fields, and across the fields was his home. Turn to page number 80 now. Now let's see how was his wife and what was the problem with her. Now Joe Thompson's wife, who happened to be childless, was not a woman of saintly temper. Now this woman, she had no calm and cool kind of a temperament. She was really vinegar aspect kind of a woman, nor much given to self-denial, and she was not at all into sacrificing anything for others' good, for other people. And Joe had well-grounded doubts. Well-grounded means firm doubts touching the manner of greeting he should receive on his arrival. Now Joe Thompson knew that his wife was a very bad-tempered woman, and he was already prepared that how she would actually, welcome them. He knew that she might even get angry, shout, or yell, whatever, right? And he knew that she's not that woman who would help or who would sacrifice something for other people, right? Mrs. Thompson saw him approaching from the window, and with ruffling feathers, means it seemed as if she was flying, met him a few paces from the door. So just imagine she was upstairs, and the moment she saw him coming towards the house, she ran out and met him outside the house. As he opened the garden gate and came in, he bore a precious burden, and he felt it to be so. Why are we calling it a precious burden? Because even Joe Thompson felt that this poor girl, this little girl, was a kind of a precious burden. As his arms held the sick child to his breast, a sphere of tenderness went out from her. So the way he was holding her, there was a kind of a bond made between them. It was a kind of a bond made between them. And when you are actually in a company of a person who's very good, you feel a kind of a bond. The same thing happened here. Maggie and Joe Thompson, they had already formed a kind of a bond of love, right? She was just a 6 or 7 years old girl, and Joe Thompson he loved children, but he happened to be a childless man. He had no children of his own. So the moment he held Maggie, there was a kind of a bond between them. Let's see. Okay, a sphere of tenderness went out from her and penetrated his feelings. So there was a kind of a bond, the feelings, the sympathy, whatever it was, the bond was already made. A bond had already corded. Corded means connected itself around them both, and love was springing into life. So there was already a kind of connection between them, right? There was a closeness, there was a kind of a connection. Maybe we can call it a father and a daughter kind of a relationship, and already there was love springing into life. So there was already love filled between them. What have you there? Sharply questioned Mrs. Thompson. Sharply, you understand, in a rude tone. Joe felt the child start and shrink against him. So maybe she was so rude that the child got scared and shrinked herself into Mr. Thompson. He did not reply. He said nothing to his wife except by a look that was pleading and cautionary. So he only must have given her a look of telling her to be careful of what you are about to speak, just get away. And that said, wait a moment. And the way he looked, it seemed as if the words were, wait a moment for explanations and be gentle. Clear? He didn't actually spoke these words. He didn't actually speak these words, I'm sorry. But this is what he actually meant. That wait a moment for explanations and be gentle with the child. And passing in, carried Maggie to the small chamber on the first floor and laid her on a bed. Then stepping back, he shut the door and stood face to face with his vinegar-tempered wife in the passageway outside. So he went up, he laid the child in a room, he came out, and then he was standing right face to face with his wife. He was ready to face his wife's temperament now. Vinegar temper, you understand? A person with a bad temper. You haven't brought home that sick brat. Brat means a spoiled child. So she says, I hope you haven't brought him here, right? Anger and astonishment were in the tones of Mrs. Joe Thompson. Her face was in a flame, so she was very angry, right? Her face was in a flame. I think women's hearts are sometimes very hard, said Joe. Now Joe knew how to speak or how to, talk to his wife, and that's what he did. He says here, I think that women's hearts are sometimes very hard. Usually Joe Thompson, this part is important, usually Joe Thompson got out of his wife's way or kept rigidly silent. Means this person was not at all into the, Every time, earlier he used to be quiet, ignore his wife, walk out of her way, and he never actually stood face to face with her. But this was the first time. Rigidly silent, or maybe he remained silent, and non-combative means he was not at all inclined towards quarrels when she fired up on any subject. So whenever she used to fire, he used to ignore her, just quiet. It was it was with some surprise, therefore, she now encountered a firmly set countenance. Countenance is face and a resolute pair of eyes. So it was a kind of a surprise for her. This was the first time when Joe Thompson was standing right in front of her face to face, ready to answer her doubts, ready to listen to her, and ready to speak to her, right? And the more way she was looking at him, there was the firmness on his face and, of course, resolute eyes. Means he was ready to talk to her, maybe whatever it is related to Maggie. Okay? Women's hearts are not half so hard as men's. So she says, no, our hearts are not at all hard as yours, men. Joe saw by a quick intuition that his resolute bearing had impressed his wife, and he answered quickly. So what he did, he could actually see, he must have understood or guessed. So he saw that his wife's expression suddenly changed and she said something else. So he took advantage of that time, and what he did, he said, "Be that as it may, every woman at the funeral turned her eyes steadily from the sick child's face." He says, maybe, but every woman who was there at the funeral, they all turned their eyes away from the sick girl. Nobody was ready to take her with them. And when the cart went off with her dead mother, hurried away and left her alone in that old hut, with the sun not an hour in the sky. So he says here, and the moment his mother's funeral was over, the cart took the body. These women, they rushed home. Nobody was there to take care of her. They left her alone in that hut. "Where were John and Kate?" said Mrs. Thompson. Farmer Jones tossed John into his wagon and drove off. Katy went home with Mrs. Alice. But nobody wanted the poor sick child. Send her to the poorhouse was the cry. Means everyone was, cry means here the topic. So everyone was, saying that send her to the poorhouse. "Why didn't you let her go then? What did you bring her? What did you bring her here for?" So she says, okay, then you should have sent her to the poorhouse. Why did you bring her here? "She can't walk to the poorhouse," said Joe. "Somebody's arms must carry her, and mine are strong enough for that task." So he says, you see, this poor girl, she cannot walk to the poorhouse, and of course somebody should have carried her. So my strong arms are strong enough to carry her. So he says that, okay. "Then why didn't you keep on? Why did you stop here?" demanded the wife. So she said, okay, then why you stopped here? You should have taken her straight away to the poorhouse, right? "Because I am not apt to go on fool's errands. The guardians must be seen and a permit obtained." He says here, because I'm not suitable, I'm not comfortable with whatever the fools have to say. Fools means the villagers, and the guardians must first be seen and a permit obtained. So he says here, there are certain rules. If you have to send a child to the poorhouse, the first thing that you need to do is speak to the guardians. Once they permit, then of course you can take the child there. There was no gainsaying this. Of course, this was true, so there was no denying to this. She couldn't say anything more. "When will you see the guardians?" was asked with irrepressible impatience. Now, there was impatience in her conversation. She just wanted to finish it off. So she says, okay, tell me, when are you seeing the guardians? Tomorrow. Why put it off till tomorrow? Go at once for the permit and get the whole thing off your hands tonight. So she says, why tomorrow? Go and do it today. Finish it today. Jane, said the wheelwright, with an impressiveness of tone that greatly subdued his wife. Subdued means calmed his wife. So maybe he must have changed his tone, and when he spoke, his wife calmed down. And what he said, let's see. I read in the Bible sometimes and find much said about little children. So he was a smart person. He gave a reference from the Bible. He said many times I've read in the Bible that how the Savior, how Jesus rebuked the disciples, criticized the people who would not receive them, who would not treat children with respect, how he took them up in his arms, how Jesus used to talk, be with children. He used to actually take them into his arms and bless them. And how he said that whosoever gave them even a cup of cold water should not go unrewarded. So he's so smart. He took the reference from the Bible and he told his wife that, see, it is even written in our Bible that children should never be ill-treated. Then he says here that you must have seen how Jesus Christ, our Savior, he used to criticize the followers. Disciples are the followers who actually mistreated children. Jesus loved children so much that he would actually, take them into his arms and bless them and love them. And it is said that whoever, any person who actually, provides these children with a glass of water, they will also be blessed. They'll never go unrewarded. So Jesus will bless everyone who will take care of the children, will love them, and will treat them nicely. So he used these words so that he could impress his wife, and that is true. Somehow it actually worked. Let's read 2-3 lines more. Now it's a small thing for us to keep this poor motherless little one for a single night. So he said, I'm sure it is okay for you to keep this little girl who is motherless only for a night. To be kind to her for a single night. I'm sure you can be kind to her only for a single night. To make her life comfortable for a single night. And I'm sure you can make her life comfortable only for a single night. So he kept on repeating single night so that his wife can keep it in his mind that whatever she's about to do is only for a night, not more than that. Right? So that is it. We'll do till here. The rest will continue in the next video. Okay. Thank you.